The following presentation is brought to you by Discovery Channel School, a leading provider of quality educational resources that help teachers bring the world to their students.
Now teaching is easier with a free subscription to the Discovery Network's Educator Guide. Providing program schedules and descriptions, this easy-to-use guide will help you tape copyright-cleared programs for classroom use. And turn to the Internet for support or resources at Discovery Channel School Online. Make Discovery Networks work for you. Call 1-800-321-1832 or find us on the World Wide Web at school.discovery.com.
Now study and discussion questions for 7 Wonders of the World, the Magic Metropolis. What human experiment did the Pharos Lighthouse symbolize and celebrate? Why was the discovery of pure, controllable gold important? How would the world be different today if money had never been invented? Assignment Discovery now presents 7 Wonders of the World, the Magic Metropolis.
Two and a half thousand years ago, a Greek scribe wrote out a dazzling list of wonders. Sights seen in the mind's eye, he said, can never be destroyed. To this day, that magic list still haunts the modern world. The captain's searching for a safe harbour. He's looking for Alexandria in Egypt, on a low and dangerous coast. The currents here are tricky. Sailors have swung the lead like that for thousands of years, sounding the rocks and looking to see if their line has river mud on it, to show they're close to shore. Before the modern city and its high-rises were built, you saw nothing on this low horizon till you almost hit the beach. Of all the 7 wonders then, the most practical was the ancient lighthouse called the Pharos. It stood here. Built around 285 BC, it was one of the 7 wonders of the world. You could see it for 30 miles out at sea, marking the ancient city and the port, a magic light that medieval legends said would burn the sails of attacking boats. The Pharos, though, did more than guide ancient shipping. It symbolized and celebrated one of humankind's most spectacular experiments, the birth of the modern city, the Magic Metropolis. Once, the long, low coast of Egypt held just a few small fishing villages, some rocks, some sandbanks and some basking seals. Then Alexander the Great arrived, He was making an empire that would stretch from Egypt to Afghanistan.
Alexander loved cities. He liked founding cities. He founded 17 cities that he called Alexandria. He had a very interesting attitude about cities and architects. A young man came to see him once called Dinocrates. He said he had a great idea for a city. He said, "I'll get a landscape and I'll carve it into likeness of you, Alexander, and in the palm of this figure will be an entire city called Alexandria." Well, the idea was that the clouds would form around the statue's head and the water would run down the veins in the arm and feed the city. Alexander looked at the plan. "I like this boy," he says. "I like the way he thinks." But the city isn't going to work, because the true blood of a city is not water down the vein, but trade. So when Alexander founded a city, he thought about trade. Look, I'll show you what I mean. The first thing Alexander thought of was a big square marketplace, and he put it right on the beach between the Nile and the sea. That's the coastline along there. And then he worked out the various quarters of the city, and he put a huge wall around the whole thing. Within 20 years, Alexander was dead, and the architects had moved on a bit. They put a causeway from the marketplace to a little island off the coast. They put a great crossroads in, and at the centre of the crossroads, they put Alexander's tomb. He died and was buried in his city. So the city really, which was full of wonders, walls, palaces, anything you can think of, had two special wonders: the lighthouse on the island and Alexander's own tomb. Think of what the man had made. He'd made a city after his own ideas. This was a city full of Egyptians, full of Greeks, full of Jews. It was a multicultural modern city, and it was full of wonders, full of temples and palaces. It was a new city for a new age.
The list of 7 wonders was made in this revolutionary new age. 2 of them, 2 urban wonders, the Pharos lighthouse and a king's tomb, a mausoleum by the sea, were subtle symbols of these cities' faith and trade, their anchor and advertisement. Ancient Alexandria, though, is buried now beneath a modern city. So there's not a lot to see of the ancient fizz and fury, of Alexander's world. And what there is in the museum. I like local museums. They're full of real things, not antiques bought at auction. Just bits and pieces found when people were making their garage or putting in traffic lights. Just loose stones from buried cities. He's nice, isn't he? It's a very beautiful fragment of completely vanished Alexandria from the first great Greek period. It's made by a Greek. Even the stone comes from Greece. Everything went past the lighthouse. Marble, slaves, silk, jewelry, wheat from Egypt. This was the beginning of El Dorado. This is the finest work you can possibly get. Practically all vanished. Look at this. Ancient Alexandria, classic Alexandria in a yard and a half. Here's a Greek altar from somebody's house. Here's a Greek text on a bit of a statue base. And here is a native Egyptian, but all dressed up in his best Greek robes. The Alexandrians love to show off. And this is quite a rare Hebrew inscription from ancient Alexandria. The Jews were a very powerful group of Alexandria's citizens. The Hebrew Bible
The Old Testament was actually translated into Greek here in the very shadow of the Pharos.
So the Pharos lighthouse signalled far more than just a safe harbour. It fell down finally in the earthquake of 1375. These, perhaps, are some of its sea-washed stones. It stood on the very tip of the harbour wall. This splendid old medieval fortress, built by the Mameluke Sultan Keajaiban, stands on its foundations. The Pharos, though, was at least 5 times higher. At more than 300 feet, the tallest building of its time. Today, children come here on trips from school. And all around them, the medieval walls are studded with much more ancient stones.
There they are, look. Hieroglyphs of a pharaoh. 2,500 years after they stood on a great obelisk holding up the door of an Arab fort.
Right in the middle of the fortress, they built a mosque. Now, the interesting thing about this mosque is that it isn't orientated like most are to Mecca. This stood on the foundations of the ancient lighthouse. And so it stands north, south, east and west, like the old lighthouse did. And if you look up, just for a while, up into its great tower, what you're looking at, really, is a ghost of the lighthouse. And can't you see in your mind's eye men and donkeys carrying fuel up to the light of the top? So as they started that lighthouse on the island of Pharos in Alexandria, those people were saying, look at our new city, how proud we are of it, of its wealth and riches and wisdom and learning. This lighthouse is going to give a new light in the ancient world.
So the great lighthouse, its lantern shielded with sheets of glass, became the symbol of the city. But all was not well inside the magic metropolis. With the city's dazzling mixture of faith and customs, many Alexandrians felt very lonely and uncertain. It was the birth of a peculiarly modern alienation. Some of them began to search. Behind Alexandria was ancient Egypt and its priests, and they had very ancient answers to those whose lives seemed to have no meaning. They said that the world's first city was also filled with darkness and despair, just like Alexandria. That city had been called Hermopolis. Its ruler's name was Thoth.
And Thoth, the wisest of all the gods, searched for the forces of creation in the caverns of wind and darkness. And there he set up a lantern, shielded with glass. And Thoth brought language and mathematics to the Egyptians. Now Thoth had a helper, a little white bird with a long beak, whose pecking measured out the land of Egypt. There's one of his mummies. The Egyptians mummified millions of these white birds, ibises, and now they've all gone.
Deep under Alexandria, secret rituals called up Thoth to bring the Alexandrians enlightenment, to join the city of the Pharos to the city of Hermopolis. And Thoth was born again. These days, The enormous ruin of Thoth's holy city, the real ancient city of Hermopolis in the middle of Egypt, is surrounded by villages of farmers. The ghost of the ancient city is still here though. Look at the village mosque. Our word minaret comes from an old Arab word, manara, which means a place where fire burns. And that perhaps, in the grey mist, is a memory of the face of Pharos. The past is all around you. The Greek cemetery at Hermopolis looks pretty harmless now. Yet these are the relics of a devastating culture clash. A single text now tells the story. A text that could be the voice of all ancient cultures that have ever suffered interference and invasion. It dreams that the gods will abandon Alexandria and rise up against these blasphemous new cities, where there are only 7 wonders, and those are all the work of men. These are the unexcavated tombs of the ancient kings of Sardis, the capital of Lydia in western Turkey, where money was invented. Money was the fuel of Alexander's brand new cities. From the 7 wonders to the stock exchange, a great part of the modern world started here, beside these bubbling fields. The city of Sardis stood at the end of a legendary trade route that ran east to Persia and the Silk Road, with merchants, mercenaries and kings like Croesus, whose legendary wealth came from the gold taken, it is said, from a little stream that ran down from the hills right through the city's ancient marketplace. Needless to say, archaeologists have long been interested in Sardis.
They didn't find King Croesus' legendary marketplace, but what they did find were the very workshops in which the modern world was forged.
When modern archaeologists dig sites like this, they always sieve all the dirt they take away. And to their amazement, the archaeologists working here found little pearls of gold turning up in their sieves. What they'd found wasn't the marketplace. It was the very place, the smelting places of the gold from the little stream. What was going on here, you see, was in these little hollows. They were putting all the gold and the wood, and it was melting down, and they were taking out these big slabs of gold from the bottom. Now, this had been going on for thousands of years. That's not difficult. What happened next was revolutionary, because you could never control the purity of this gold. It had lead, it had silver, it had all sorts of things in it. But the people here, for the first time, made pure gold. They took this lovely golden substance, they beat it flat, they mixed it with salt, they put it in pots and they cooked it. When they took the gold from the pots, for the first time in human history, they made controllable, pure gold.
So, as usual, the very dust of ancient lives, tiny little relics of the past, suddenly become so important. You see, people lived and worked here about 600 BC, just when Croesus and a few other people were experimenting with the idea of money. Now, pure gold means that you can make money which is always the same. It's an eternal symbol when the goddess Artemis Cybele was stamped on equal amounts of Croesus gold, people knew what they had in their hands. Within 50 years, there were banks, misers, merchants, marketplace, men who lived by buying and selling. This idea of a single abstract value that you can actually hold in your hand had come into the world for the first time.
Money, great sacks of money, had served to build many of Alexander's brand new cities, and several of the Seven Wonders too. As you might expect, when Alexander died in 323 BC, his empire quickly divided into smaller kingdoms, each of them ruled by his generals and his bankers. Each city was alone. Today, the real Alexander seems as elusive as the wind. Yet even the simplest stories of his life tell us something of his time, the age of the Seven Wonders. One tale tells us that Alexander and some friends travelled from the shore of Egypt into the blank Sahara, searching for a famous oracle. They got lost here, the legend says, and nearly died of thirst. And the gods sent crows to them to show them the way down through the mountain of the moon, down into a hidden valley and the lake of the oasis of Siwa. And at its centre, amidst the waving palms, the temple of the oracle. Inside a small dark chamber roofed with palm logs, Egyptian priests told Alexander something that affected him until the day he died. No one now knows what it was, neither will we ever know. Whatever it was, though, it didn't stop Alexander from invading all the ancient East and leaving its cities as devastated, dusty shells. Sure, people still lived in them after Alexander's time, but they'd been changed forever. The brutal, self-confident Greeks had shown them another sort of city, a different way of being. Yet this story of the journey into Siwa shows Alexander himself desperately searching for the old securities. And that, perhaps, is what he really discovered at the Temple of the Oracle. That in the magic metropolis, with all its fizz and fury, it's still impossible to live successfully without a past.
Coming up now, answers to the questions for 7 Wonders of the World, the Magic Metropolis. The Pharaoh's lighthouse symbolized and celebrated the birth of the modern city. The discovery of pure, controllable gold allowed ancient Greeks to make standard gold coins that were identical in value. Before this time, coins were inconsistent in value. Try this activity with your class. Create a commemorative plaque listing Alexander the Great's achievements from the perspective of one of his soldiers. Then, create a wanted poster from the perspective of someone Alexander conquered and oppressed. To learn more, members of the American Association of School Librarians and Assignment Discovery suggest The 7 Wonders of the World, A History of the Modern Imagination by John and Elizabeth Romer. Ask your librarian to help you explore the many resources your library has to offer.